All right, thank you for tuning in on AWANI. My name is Nabila Khalida, and this year World Backup Day falls right before Hari Raya Aidilfitri, and it will be a good opportunity to talk about the importance of backup data in retail companies. So right now, joining me on the line, the right authority to speak on this is Satish Murthy, the Director of Systems Engineering Questia ASEAN. Good morning, Satish. How are you?
Good morning, Nabia. Wonderful and a happy fasting season to everybody.
Thank you so much. Firstly, perhaps we can start with how can we highlight the critical importance of data backup for retail businesses, especially during festive seasons where the surge in online orders and also clothing purchases. So what can we expect when it comes to data backups on during festive seasons?
Yeah, thanks, Nabia. So if you look at the average e-commerce rate that happens in Malaysia, year over year, there's a phenomenal growth, right? People get used to buying things online, right? There's about 5% on an average if you see year over year. So that is a phenomenal change that is happening. And post-COVID, we have seen enormous amount across ASEAN, across worldwide as well. Now, if you see how does that impact and how does that change? Now, when you have massive amount of customers who want to click online and buy things online, especially during festival season, what happens is it attracts the bad guys as well, right? They are looking forward. Can I get some personal information? Can I get the credit card numbers? Can I pull out some names and phone numbers that will be useful to them? And also, when you click online, you're actually buying from some company. So that is a huge target for these guys as well. So they also look forward, hey, can I go after them with some kind of a ransomware or a vulnerability attack so that they can make a catch during that season?
Perhaps you can share, perhaps particularly in what ways these malicious actors tend to attack these retail businesses. What kind of threats that we should expect?
Yeah. So if you look at the two-way threat that can happen, one is through the end customer, right? So when I click online, when you click online or somebody clicks online, it is a point of, can I capture all the personal information? Can I get the card numbers and bill numbers so that I can manipulate data? So this is kind of data siphoning, if you may call. The other end of the spectrum, the major one which you could think about is the enterprises. Enterprises who you are buying from have massive amount of data. You're looking at millions of customers for a particular goods that you buy. So if, for the bad guys, they would try to target the enterprise by sending a simple email. Hey, double click. You have never been to Langkawi for the last 2-3 years. Click here so that you get 3 days free. And as a consumer or an enterprise administrator, I will double click that, right? The moment you double click, there comes your ransomware. There comes your vulnerability. It lands on your laptop or it lands on your personal computer, waits for a few days, maybe even 30 days, maybe even 60 days before it can take into effect. So maybe even after the festival period is over, the ransomware can creep into the environment, into the network, impact your application, impact your backups, impact your primary data. And then what they do, when I say impact, it means they encrypt the data. So that means you can't access the data set anymore, and they ask for money. So the company or the enterprise has only two options. Either they pay the money, right, which is also vulnerable because I don't know if I pay the money to this third party, will they attack again? I don't know. The second part of that is that maybe uh, the challenge is I don't want to pay, then I need to have a very robust enterprise backup that will help me to recover, right? So
Mhm.
all of these are into play from either when you click the button all the way, whether it is siphoned, to the enterprise data where you pull out from. So both are vulnerable and we need to be staying protected and be aware.
Okay, those are the kind of threats that we might face, or perhaps the retail businesses should expect from during festive seasons, especially. But how can we mitigate, especially these organizations? What can they prepare themselves before these festive seasons, and what are specific mitigate steps or perhaps initiatives that they should do?
Yeah, fantastic. Great question, by the way. So if you look at how can an enterprise and an end customer prevent such attacks, the first thing, as a personal user of an e-commerce website, I need to stay tuned. When I say stay tuned, is to understand the intricacies of working e-commerce business, right? So when I share information, do I follow a website which looks legal or is it fake? I need to be educated. So I need to understand how things may vary, because I may go to a website, say, for example, a huge bank in Malaysia, I just double click it. I don't know if it's a real site or a fake site. So you need to look out for that verification and validation, making sure that you have the multi-factor authentication. You know, when you have an OTP, which is a one-time password that you get back from a bank, when you do that such transactions, you feel much more comfortable rather than just it goes through, right? So you just make sure that you have a multi-factor authentication when you do that transaction. You make sure that a validation of multiple things are checked before the transaction can go through. That's one part of the thing. Now, as an enterprise, if you look at it on the other side of the spectrum, where you pull this information, or who is serving these end customer, they need to make sure that they are well aware that they have a very robust backup, right? Having modern technologies, because a ransomware attack can be severe. It can cripple, it can make sure that, say, a reputation of the whole company can go down, right? You and I will not go and transact with a particular vendor who has been attacked by ransomware the moment it comes on the news. So making sure that as a promoter or a vendor or the principal who actually presents myself some goods on e-commerce website, I need to make sure that I can prevent ransomware and vulnerabilities. I can protect my data. And in case of such event happens, see, you are never being going to be 100% resilient. There are always some gaps, but making sure if such impact happens to my end customers, how fast can I revert back? How fast can I recover? How fast can I go back to my customer and say, hey, I had a breach, but don't worry, all your data is safe and we are going in the right path. So these are all very, very important to make sure that we are safe and sound on the e-commerce website, especially during the festival season.
Let me take from your answer. Let's say some organizations or retail businesses already experience data breaches during high traffic periods. So what are perhaps the immediate and long-term consequences that they may face?
See, fantastic. Again, if you look at the challenges a company could face, assuming that a data breach happens, right? If I, as an end customer, I lost my data, I feel quite sad because I have to call the credit card company immediately, block my card. I'm sure you are well aware. And if you go back to making sure my passwords are changed, making sure my access are changed, and so on. So that is from a personal end. We also make sure that the data is safe and our own transactions in the futures are safe. Now you go back to the other spectrum as an enterprise, they have huge challenges because the moment ransomware encrypts your data, you are going to pay millions of dollars back to them. And you don't know, no guarantee that your data is safe. So that's huge impact to the business. Second, the news, if you're a public company, you have to let them know. You have to let the market know across different spectrum there to make sure that, hey, my company had a data breach. So what is an impact to the company? Reputation damage, right? That is severe when you think about, hey, my company is being impacted. I have a huge reputation damage here. How do I recover back? What should I go to my end customers and say, don't worry about it, I am fine? And we got to understand the business can have an impact because the moment some company is impacted today, nobody, unless the company can guarantee, will go to that website. So the entire festival season would be gone for them. So it's a huge loss. So we got to understand both as a consumer of a goods on e-commerce and also on the other end of the spectrum as an enterprise, we are well protected, well aware, well educated, making sure that we take the right decisions, having critical technologies. And when I talk about enterprise, I'll just add here, technology like having immutable backups, technology which will give you rapid recovery of data, technology that will give you, say, not an easy deletion, right? So that means a ransomware user comes, I don't want them to delete anything easily, right? Making sure that we have checks and balances to keep the data safe.
Yes, like you mentioned, the side effect, the impact of ransomware, also data breaches are not just towards financial losses, it gives impact towards brand reputation and also customers' trust. So once this impact faced by these retail businesses and organizations, what further, as in the long-term consequences, what can they do as to mitigate and also prepare for this effect? Perhaps Cohesity has a solution?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So thanks on that segue. So if you look at how enterprise customers today look at, they look at most of the C-levels, their thought process is no more about performance, no more about data availability. That is given. But one of the biggest thing that goes into every single boardroom today or board of directors is thinking about data security. You know, if you go back, maybe hundreds of years ago, there were the king, they were the castle, and how do you protect the crown jewels? You know, if you go to any kingdom, there are the crown jewels, which is the gold and the silver and the diamond and the ruby. So you protect them with different levels of security. Similarly, what is the crown jewel today for a company? Let's assume a bank, let's assume a hospital, let's assume something. The bank, their financial data, which is the critical aspect of their customers, their transactions and everything, is their crown jewel, right? Which is the core banking asset. Then you look at hospitals, the medical records and so on, so about patients and health of those patients and also the doctors involved. That is their crown jewel. Similarly, you look at different industries, you have something called crown jewel, which is the most critical piece of your data. So how do we protect them? So you can always build the data centers, you can have physical security, you have the network security, you also have different levels of security all the way to your crown jewel, which is your critical data, making sure that your data is safe. Now that is all great, but most of the threats that happen is by, we just spoke about double clicking an email. So how do I protect such data? So I need to make sure in an enterprise, we have an ability to protect, detect, and recover.
And when it comes to threats that involves technology, and I believe the solution, part of the solution should involve technology as well. And right at this moment, I would include the, I would say AI or artificial intelligence. How can they play a role in enhancing cybersecurity that measures for online retail businesses, particularly in detecting and also responding to evolving cyber threats in real time?
Awesome. So AI or generative AI and responsible AI is changing how we are thinking today, right? So if you look at from a consumer perspective, a lot of checks are done through AI today, right? I'm not saying there are not deep fakes and things like that. There are always bad guys. So, but where the good guys come in is to make sure that I and you are recognized as a face, making sure that the right face and the right approach, right fingerprint, the biometrics are correct, making sure that the password and the analytics are correctly done through the AI. Now, from the enterprise perspective, AI is changing again. How we look at making the data secure. Today, from a Cohesity perspective, we have the ability to detect ransomware patterns on the data set using AI. And we are able to interact with AI tools, which is language models, by the way, from an enterprise perspective. Hey, detect such ransomware patterns, let the enterprise customer know. That is important. Second is also to look at such patterns and give data mining experience, right? So it is going beyond data security, making sure that we also make sure that we follow compliance and also give you that data insights that any enterprise would need. So if you look at how AI is changing, and it will be evolving over the next 3 to 5 years, and we would see a lot of customers. I had my great conversation with a lot of customers in Malaysia about over the last few weeks, and every one of them is tuned to AI, because that is the future, and they understand why. Because you said it right, it helps in terms of data security, it helps you to provide these enterprise great data insights.
But beyond this, I would say, besides technological, but beyond traditional cybersecurity practices, what innovative approaches that these organization enterprises can practice to further enhance the continuity of operations and also data security, especially during peak sales and festive seasons, to characterize by heighten this cyber risk these days?
Okay, so if you look at the core asset of any company, right? We go to the enterprise first here. So making sure that your data is safe. So how do you make it is extremely safe? There are multiple approaches where you can take, where you have modern data isolation, where you can make sure we have an approach technologically, we call it as 3-2-1, having multiple copies on multiple medias on different locations, right? So when we follow this approach, making sure that you have copies of data, not just in one data center, making sure that you have multiple copies in multiple data center. That's number one, right? So that you have any kind of disaster, you are safe. The second important one would be making sure that your data is immutable. So what is immutable? It is called write once, read many, where you can't delete the data. You can write data, but you can't delete it. So that's very important, the second important one. The third one is to make sure that we have technology like quorum, and I'll explain what quorum is to make sure that there is no single person who goes and deletes data, right? Because it can be an insider threat. He or she may have a password where they can just delete things. So how do you prevent unilateral changes? Is to make sure that you have a quorum where an employee wants to delete or a ransomware user want to delete. There are 3 or 5 users who will have to approve. So quorum becomes a very, very important concept when you think about making sure that the data is safe. And furthermore, is to have that AI intelligence. Have that AI and machine learning intelligence to detect patterns of ransomware. There are known signatures, there are unknown signatures. So from a cohesivity perspective, we are not the only company here, right? But we work with a lot of security alliances, right? Whether it is, from cohesivity's perspective, I'll just give a few names. We work with Palo Alto, we work with Cisco, we work with Big ID. There are plenty of security companies today. So security, we call it as Nabia today as it is a team sport, right? It is not a one company or a one person job, but it is to make sure that the entire ecosystem is aware and making sure that the customer's data is safe. So these are all extremely important steps to look at from the enterprise perspective and the consumer perspective, which is you and me from when we do the e-commerce, making sure that they are trained well, making sure that they are well aware of challenges, making sure that they follow certain basic principles of trading online, which is MFA, not sharing the password. And I have seen some customers, I'll just give you for fun, where password is all great. It is very complex, but it is right on the dashboard. You don't have to look forward for very far away. It is right on their screen. So not making a simple mention that the password is available, making sure it is complex, making sure that you rotate them regularly, and also making sure that they train themselves to understand that MFA and these security practices are important to prevent data leaks and prevent unnecessary data attacks that can happen.
And I believe the participation of IT as well as SecOps in helping to overall, in terms of overall resilience of retail businesses and enterprises and organizations helps a lot. So perhaps you can share a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. So you look at today, any enterprise, and you call it right, you have an IT team, you have a security team, you have a business team, and all these work together. For the first time, IT used to always work independent. They used to provide high performance from the application perspective. The SecOps look at the security. The business teams, they do their job. But because of this ransomware and because of these unnecessary data vulnerabilities and hackers and all these things that are happening, they are all in today. They have formed a consortium in many organizations across ASEAN, where they have formed a consortium to make sure that there is always a security involvement in any kind of new business that they procure, right? There's always IT, which is part of the latest technology, but a thought is always given for data security, making sure that secure best practices are followed, making sure that most new products that they bring into an organization follow the security best practices. And when an employee joins a bank or a hospital, which is something that I learned in Malaysia a week ago, where a new employee comes, they go through the security best practice before they start, right? That's on the first day, making sure how do you protect your password, making sure that you don't share certain credentials outside. So these are some of the key things that will help us protect the data and move as both from a consumer confidence as well as the enterprise confidence.
But generally, Satish, as an expert, Perhaps this question is a bit of the festive season's questions, but how do you see generally in terms of cybersecurity trends, not just in ASEAN, but the whole global? How do you see the trends right now? Is it getting worse or it's better?
See, it's always a catch up. You got to understand, right? So we have evolved. So I'll give you a quick analogy here. We all experienced through the unfortunate COVID, right? And it had multiple waves, right? COVID, wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3, if you may call it, because we had different kind of vaccinations that evolved over time. Similarly, if you look at during this COVID wave, and this is exactly uh, where the ransomware attackers had a huge benefit because we all turned online. We moved to Zoom, we moved to Google Meet, we moved to many, many things. And we also started buying things online, massive amount of transaction that was going on. So if you look at during this COVID waves, if you may call, there was also ransomware wave in parallel. There's wave 1.0, which we call ransomware 1.0, which impacted the primary data, right? And then the ransomware 2.0 evolved after 6 months because those bad guys also evolved. So they started attacking backup data, right? And the third wave evolved after a year and a half, which is called the ransomware 3.0, where they went after extortion or maybe pulling the data in where they copy it, right? So very similar, there is a wave that is going on today as well. Now, if you look at what companies has evolved, such as Cohesity and all the enterprise security providers today, where we have evolved, where we protect the primary data, we protect the backup data, and detect using AI and pattern analytics to prevent breach of data, right? So making sure that over this period of time where evolution of, I mean, as the bad things evolve, we also, from a technology perspective and providing good solutions to enterprise, we got to always be ahead of the game, right? Making sure that we train, making sure that we take the latest AI and ML practices to the enterprise, making sure customers understand from both enterprise and consumer practices that we are very clear on how do we protect the data, making sure that there is a consortium of security because it is always a team sport, I call that, right? Making sure that all the way from the first person who reaches or physical security all the way to the data center, every one of them is important, right? Making sure that we follow all the best practices, making sure there are no free FTP servers, making sure that there is no Windows servers that was installed in year 2000 is not touched upon, making sure all of these best practices are evolved, making security of passwords. There is a password change which happens regularly, making sure that they understand how to interact with consumers, how to interact with the web page, and so on. Every one of them is important, but still, assuming that the bad guys come in, which will happen, right? I mean, because they are also evolving, making sure that the data is immutable and breach doesn't have a huge impact. And you would agree with me, Navia, having an impact is one part, but making rapid recovery is a huge benefit. Technology such as Cohesity today provides a technology like instant mass recovery, right? Where you can bring your business back in less than 2 to 4 hours. And it's also important from a consumer confidence perspective, assuming an enterprise had an impact, can you recover back your business on time? Right? So each one of them, if you look at, we probably can spend many hours on discussing each of these as a best practice. But at a high level, today, I would say across the world, there is a huge thought process around how do we defend that against the bad guys? How do we protect the data, making sure enterprise data is safe and sound for customers?
Amazing, amazing explanation. But all the solutions to mitigate data breaches and also risk malicious attacks, it seems too unreachable or how would say it's unavailable towards all these micro sellers, the MSMEs especially. So how can they protect their data, but at the same time the cost is, how do I say, it's cost efficiency towards them?
Super, right? So if you look at the MSMEs or the smaller consumer business, which models that you just asked about, they are mostly on an evolution phase, right? Their business is growing. They are now starting to use more on social media. They advertise and they keep growing their business. So the first thought process I would say is they are slowly moving towards the cloud, right? Which is the hyperscalers. The benefit of the cloud is they are providing high quality solution, which is both performance, storage, and things like that. And they also provide applications right on the fly on the cloud, whether it is Amazon or Google or Azure and other clouds that are available. So once you get connected to that, you are much more secure than building your own, right? But at much a lower cost, because now cloud you can consume, you can expand, you can shrink. But the benefit is you can travel around ASEAN or in around Malaysia, and the cloud experience is the same. Now, one more important thing here, cloud is also well protected with companies such as on the back end, you can always protect it with companies like Cohesity today, where we can help protect and secure the data on the cloud for the cloud. So that's the second part here. Now, the third, if you look at from the consumer, end consumer who is connected to the cloud, it's again a good journey because you're well safe and sound because you have the enterprise level grade protection and security that is available on the cloud. Now, for other vendors who say, hey, I'm cloud, I understand, but I think I wanted to hold my own data, own services, fine with that. But make sure that your data security evolved, making sure that all the best practices of data security, which some of them we discussed today, and some of them you can learn more, where you make sure that your data is safe, even though you run your own data center, even though you have your own provider and services, making sure that most of the best practices are followed so that data breach are minimized significantly.
All right, that was Satish Murthy, the Director of Systems Engineering of Cohesity ASEAN. And of course, towards all the retail businesses, organizations, enterprise out there, be sure to have contingency plans should be in place to address staffing limitations during this peak season or during festive season to ensure data security. I would like to say thank you again to Satish Murthy for all the insights and explanations, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Nabia. Thank you, team. Really appreciate some of the fantastic questions that we interacted with. Thank you very much.